Welcome back to another episode of the Heat Your Home Energy Show, where today we're joined by Ethan from Discrete Heat again, and we're going to be talking a little bit today around what the future of low temperature, low carbon heating systems look like. We're depending on when this show goes out, but certainly as we sit here today, there's been a lot of announcements this week with the Future Home Standard last week or week before, the Clean Heat Market Mechanism. All things that are going to have a big impact on the way our homes are heated in the not too far distant future and for the long term future.
Yeah.
So maybe if we start with certainly the one that's probably been doing the rounds on social media. Certainly from I've heard everything from boiler manufacturers saying they're going to charge an extra £170 or something, £200 per boiler.
Yeah.
So do you mind, just for those who don't know, what is the Clean Heat Market Mechanism and what's it going to do?
So the Clean Heat Market Mechanism is like a government terminology for a slow introduction of the boiler ban. Basically, it's to pivot boiler manufacturers towards making and selling heat pumps. There's potentially a dual strategy there that may have backfired, it may not have backfired. Part of the strategy is obviously get fossil fuel boiler manufacturers to also provide clean heat energy sources, so heat pumps. The other thing is that if you have a company that sells boilers and heat pumps, they're not likely to put out any negative press about heat pumps because they also have to sell heat pumps. Now, what that means is it means that if you are a company that makes a large, now this doesn't apply to new build either. So there's all these layers of complication. So they take the number of boiler sales that a specific manufacturer has had, so units out the door, discounting new build. Okay, so if you're a boiler manufacturer who only supplies new build for the last 10 years, you've sort of got away with it. If you're a boiler manufacturer who supplies a lot through merchants, boiler swaps or combis out to the retail market, you've got a bit of a uphill battle. Basically, whatever number of boilers you manufacture and shift, from next year, 4% of that number you need to sell in heat pumps. Any units that you're short, so you're short of your quota, it's $3,000 per unit. It's massive.
As a fine, essentially?
Effectively, yeah. It's effectively
it's been
a fine.
Referred to in all different ways. It's a tax.
Credit.
But it's
you purchase a credit.
It's a fine, though, isn't it? That's what's going to happen. And I think, they're already coming through, whether or not there's going to be a bit of lenience on this kind of first round of these things coming in. But it was kind of, although it comes in January, the first batch of fines, my understanding from speaking with the likes of Ideal, is that, they're going to be kind of landing in people's offices that come the new year, because it's been based on what they've done in this year. So how are they combating this?
Right. So it's pretty much inevitable that boilers will be sold. Like as you've mentioned, boilers are often purchased it's like a distressed purchase. I need to swap my boiler. It's just packed in and it needs to be changed. So one of the strategies that they're employing to mitigate the impact of the fine is to increase the cost of boilers, whack £100 or £150 onto the top line of boiler cost. And that increase is just a pure profit, essentially. And that additional profit will help mitigate the damage of the fine. Now, some people in the industry are saying that's a political maneuver. Some people are saying, well, any CFO with a basic Excel spreadsheet would tell you that's a shrewd move. so
that's the boiler manufacturers are sat there going, well, we're going to get a tax on this.
We're going to pay a £10 million fine next year.
So we're just going to, so if we all collect together and we all just say, right, well, the prices of boilers have gone up by 100 and 150 quid. So ultimately, if you're a consumer wanting to buy a replacement boiler, you're now being hit. You're going to be paying more for that boiler come next year than you would have been paying this year. And those letters have gone out. This is not kind of, scaremongering. The manufacturers have wrote to their installers and told them, because of this, prices are going up.
Yeah.
Next year.
Now that does two things. Well, one, it may just be a perfectly legitimate move from a financial perspective. At the end of the day, these companies are businesses, And, they are being impacted by new legislation. Their profit margins are being squeezed all the time by house builders and everything else. So it may just be the fact that their finance department has gone, this is the only way we're going to cover it. Because they've got to cover it somehow. You can't just pluck 10 million quid out of thin air. And the other thing is that what it does is it sows this seed of resistance in the installers. That's the damaging thing. That now you've created a reason for installers to hate heat pumps. Those heat pumps, they've pushed the price of boilers up because they're doing this, they're doing the other. The problem is that if we are going to pursue net zero, and we have to because it's been drafted into law. Okay, one of the things that everybody seems to forget is that net zero 2050 is law. Okay, not just in the UK but Europe. America. So they have to do some carrot and some stick.
Yeah.
There's a bit of, you're making a huge fundamental change to the way people are heating their houses. That's the top and bottom of it. And it is huge. It's not like we're making a slight tweak to the flow temperatures or whatever. The legislation is moving to electrification of heat. And if everybody moved over to electric radiators tomorrow, the grid couldn't cope with it. So heat pumps is a way of getting, 4 kilowatts for every 1 kilowatt out of the grid. That has to be the way we move to electrification. Yeah. So bit of carrot, $7,500 grant, bit of stick, you're going to get fined for not selling heat pumps.
This is the thing is that to make a real change in the decarbonisation of heat, the average homeowner, and I would say just the average homeowner, doesn't probably sit there worrying too much about net zero targets and what have you. So
no.
The unfortunate reality is government, and whichever government ends up being in power, still has to go down this route, is they have to, if we are to get away from burning gas, for whatever reason, whatever the people's driver is, we'll have people that'll comment on this, and we've seen it on ones, that climate change is a complete myth, that it's, the whole thing's been made up. So fine, put that in a box if you're that way inclined. Think of it on the fact that we're paying more for our gas because of the war going on in Ukraine. That's a fact. That is happening as a direct byproduct of what's gone over there. Something that we had zero control over in the UK has impacted what we pay. So if we were just trying to get off gas just to give ourselves greater energy security, as an example, and we wanted to transition to these, we're now in a situation where with this where we've got another £2,500 added on to the boiler upgrade scheme, which is a grant from the government. We've touched on it quite a few times in the show, but it's essentially £7,500 to upgrade your heating system and fit a heat pump in your home.
Yeah.
And that comparison would always have been, well, what does it cost to have to replace my boiler? And that conversation has just got another £100 to £150 more expensive on the boiler. So you would imagine that's just made the conversation slightly easier for a heat pump installation.
Yeah. Yeah, I would. I would say that, but you've addressed a number of issues on this podcast with previous guests. With Clayton, for example, you addressed the need for education, the need for training, the need for more installers. That's massive. You've addressed with Octopus. You've addressed the costs. How are we going to make this affordable for people? And that's massive. But a really big one is getting the common man in the street to care. Yeah. To really care at all about that. It's care enough to make a change. Why would they? Your average person, they wake up in a climate controlled house, they put the kids in a climate controlled car, drop them off at a climate controlled school and go and work at a climate controlled office. So, their life's fine. Yeah. They say, it's going up by 1 degree outside. They go, whatever, I'll just open the window. They think that's it. Yep. And so you need legislative drivers, and that it will create resistance, and it is a difficult decision, and it does make you unpopular. And yes, it is going to have a knock-on impact. But the challenge around electrification of heat is not just cost. Because there's certain companies that have addressed that, or are addressing that. There's market disruptors who are offering heat pumps for free or heat pump systems for free, and you just pay monthly and whatever else. and still there's resistance there.
Oh, yeah.
There's still, because they're concerned about disruption. They're concerned about increasing the size of the radiators. They're concerned about, is it going to affect their lifestyle? And, in my experience of sales and marketing, I think any product, whether it's a t-shirt or a heating system, it has to fall into sort of one of two categories for a customer. Is it going to make me more money or save me money? Is it going to improve my lifestyle?
And this is the real challenging part of where we're at right now, because it's a very kind of clear-ish statement coming out from government. This tax going onto the boiler manufacturers, an additional, I forget the figure, was it 400 million or billion that was introduced for the boiler upgrade scheme, additional funding that's going into that pot, and we'll see it through for another 4 or 5 years on top. So it's a very clear statement of more money going into the pot to support this.
Yeah.
So if I do like to think of it in that kind of those basic consumer terms, because as you say, if it's 1 degree outside, it doesn't really affect me. What's going to drive the man in the street, the average person in their home, is going to sit there and say, I'm paying more for my energy again. It's going up again. And we had Mick Wall on the show from Energy Stats UK, and I see him as the kind of future retrofit home of the UK, in that he has gone on this transition from kind of a standard home to having solar installed, then battery storage, then heat pump and electric car. And he's done it all incrementally. And this guy, he's your average Joe.
Yeah.
There was no bigger driver to him at the start than the fact that he looked at the pros and cons of a solar system and decided to do it. And there was some tariffs available at the time that made it a bit more incentivized. And then he's an IT guy, so he's done some playing around and optimizing it. So, and he's now pretty much at zero bills.
Okay.
With the solar export guarantee that he gets and all these kind of bits and bobs. And he's at this point, he's time consuming and he has to do all this stuff. And we're working with him on how we can kind of embed the Heatio home energy management system into the home to take that away from him, and just so it's all wrapped up and managed on his behalf, how he wants it to be managed.
Okay, yeah.
But if we can turn around and say, right, here's Mick in a semi-detached house, 180, maybe 150 square meters, your average home. Yeah. With his wife and a couple of kids working. He works in a university doing IT support. His wife's an NHS nurse. So we're not talking people.
So specific. Is this someone you know?
Well, this is Mick. This is Mick with Mick Wall, and they're saying he is the reason why I think it's so important one, because in our day-to-day lives, we come across people that are living in these, huge houses and they can afford, these incredible systems. Whereas Mick is your average Joe, and he's made this transition and he's now like, I'm paying next to nothing for my energy. Yeah. Now he's had to shout for these systems, but he's used grants and stuff like that along the way. So when you take, that to me is what's going to get the average person to sit up and go, I'm paying for this. If they go around to their neighbour's house for a meal one night and they're going, I don't know why you're still paying for energy. I'm not paying anything for my energy.
True. Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the things that's overlooked. So in the industry that we work in, it's like an echo chamber. So, you and I live on LinkedIn land, and everyone you're connected to is in somehow associated to heating and energy, and everyone I'm connected to is somehow associated with heat and energy. And if you and I go for a pint, we'll end up talking about heat and energy. So you're constantly in this echo chamber. But I pluck out one of a mate of mine who's an accountant. He's not bothered. No. So he's like, well, whatever. So I get dead excited. Future Home Standard gets announced last week, and I've got like 5 or 6 different WhatsApp groups blowing up in my phone. It's been released, go and read the documentation now. People sharing PDFs. No,
I love it, but I didn't have any of those WhatsApp groups.
Did you not? Oh God!
Can you invite me to them, please?
Yeah, you can jump on if you want. It's an echo chamber, as I've said. The way you're going to get the middle of the bell curve, right? So you got the general public and how much they care about the environment or how much they care about reducing their carbon emissions. It's a bell curve, okay? You've got the people at one end who will glue themselves to the M6, okay? And then you've got people at the other end who will, I don't know, run over the people on the M6. You're never gonna take my internal combustion engine off me. And the people at the other end who whatever, they're riding the bike 40 miles in the rain to work. It's the bit in the middle. Like any bell curve, it's all of the people in the middle. That's the vast majority of people that you need to convince. There's some that will never be convinced. And that's kind of one of the things that I've learned in the last few years. If you get into a conversation with somebody who doesn't want to engage in that, and it's just no, don't even bother, don't even waste your oxygen, or don't even, emit carbon trying to explain it. The people in the middle of the bell curve will need, it will basically need to have no financial impact, and it will need to roll in a lifestyle benefit.
It certainly feels like it can't be any more. It can't be any more expensive up front than the existing alternative.
Yeah,
and then I'm actually, from what we're seeing now, it feels like they're actually going. Plus, I need to see a significant saving on what I'm doing.
So take anything that's gone unicorn, any business, Uber. Okay. More convenient and cheaper. So cheaper overall and way more convenient. And what Uber addressed was not the concern of price with taxis. What Uber addressed was the concern of waiting for a taxi. It was the, is it here yet? Where is it? Do they know that we're waiting? They're closing up the restaurant. Why aren't they here yet? You can see on the map where he is. So he's coming. So with Uber, people would probably even pay more because they pay for the convenience of knowing, okay, it's all fine. So that offers them a massive lifestyle benefit. That's one of the things that is becoming quite apparent to me with our business, is that people are going out there to sell a heat pump, and they are going to customers who've inquired, right? So these aren't knocking on door, cold salesmen, hey, do you want a heat pump? These are customers who have come to them and said, we're really interested in having a heat pump. Can you come and see us and send a surveyor over? So energy company sends surveyor over, surveyor talks to them about heat pump, customers dead excited, can't wait to do this, renewable journey. And they go through all of the stuff, and then they go, okay, now let's talk about the inside of the house. We need to find somewhere to put a cylinder. Oh.
Inconvenience.
Where are you going to put that? Well, you've got an airing cupboard on the landing that was there from the old cylinder. Why don't we stick it in there? Well, that's where I keep all my towels. That's where I keep my Christmas decorations, whatever else. What else can we do? Well, let's talk about your radiators. That one's going to have to come out. We're going to have to put a K3 in, or double the size of that. Oh, right. All of a sudden, there's this compromise. We're finding it, especially in London. So people have got like cast iron radiators or tall anthracite grey radiators, and they want to go to heat pumps because they're early adopters. Yeah, they've got a social value that says, I need to move away from fossil fuels. I should electrify my heat. So they're doing it first, and they're not going for it because they don't want to take the designer rads out and put pressed white steel rads in that are from B&Q. Yeah, they want something fancy. So what we're doing with the heat pump manufacturers is, it's not a compromise, it's a plus point. So we can get rid of your boiler and fit a heat pump, and we can get rid of your radiators, as opposed to we can get rid of your boiler and install a heat pump, but we're going to have to increase the size of your radiators. The moment you compromise somebody in an actual, tangible, practical, aesthetic way, it really drops the poison pill into the whole solution. And then they go, some other way around it, maybe we could just do solar and batteries and get an electric car. They sort of talk the way out of a heat pump because of the actual compromises. If you have a heat pump outside that's Worcester Bosch, or it's Ideal, or it's Valent, I think the average Joe doesn't really care. They might care if it's white or if it's anthracite grey, maybe. But generally, the middle of the bell curve, this average normal person, they care about the practical implications to their lifestyle. What we're trying to do is roll in additional benefits to the specification of a heat pump. And if that can be done at a affordable rate, so it basically costs you, like you said, no more upfront, and we can get rid of your radiators, and we can get rid of your boiler. It's all and positive, positive, positive. And that we see a massive increase in uptake. So the average thermostat registered installer who sells heat pumps converts about 85% of their leads, because they go out and they sell the heat pump and then they sell the thermostat. And it's more expensive. thermoskirt is dearer than a bog standard panel rad, but people don't really care.
No, and by the point, I mean, and that unfortunately there is a transition somewhere in here, and cost, as we mentioned, is going to play a big part in that customer's journey and experience and the level of uptake. But right now, if you, let's say a qualified customer, so we get people phoning up and they've seen the boiler upgrade scheme and they think it's just it's a grant for just simply replacing your boiler with a gas boiler.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about people who have kind of genuinely, they understand, they've got a budget there or thereabouts to do this kind of work, and the big driver behind those people is, I'm going to make this decision. I've got this money to do this, and we get them coming in on both two different angles. We get people coming in saying, "This is the amount of money I've got. What is the best I can achieve with this?
Yeah,
but I'm planning on being here for quite a while. So, in 2 years' time, what's the next part that I do?" So we get a lot of people coming to us because of the design approach that we take. In a lot of cases, we tend to specify heat pumps with the capability of doing higher temperature.
Okay, yeah.
We're quite a big fan of, let's get them in and see the true thermal performance of the property rather than utilizing heat loss calculations to do a measured assessment. Get it in, see which rooms are struggling, and then make our upgrades based on the needs of the rooms and having that.
Do you not find that customers are a bit concerned about sort of putting it in and then working on the basis that they might solve other problems that arise later, or is that quite a nice thing for them to know? Look, we might run into some issues and we can mitigate it at a later date.
Yeah, exactly that. And it tends to be those customers they're like, I've had somebody around and they've told me I've got to rip up all my floors, they've got to take out all my pipe work, and I've got to replace all my radiator. And they're like, I am convinced that is not the right way to do this.
Yeah, half the time the radiators are oversized anyway.
Exactly.
And why have you got that in it?
And then you add that to the fact that most people going out doing heat loss calculations are massively oversizing them as well. So you end up in a situation where you've got people going, your room needs this, and you've got to have a K3, and we've got to reinforce a wall to hang this thing on them, and all your pipe work's got to come out. And actually, what we're doing is ripping up perfectly good systems and putting in better systems, but or you've got people that aren't then going for a heat pump system because they've just been they've actually had a technical expert come in and do an assessment that's told them that their house essentially isn't suitable, certainly within the parameters of what they're willing to have changed.
Yeah, understood.
But when so for those customers, they go down that route and they go in, and then we monitor the system and how it performs, and then we start looking at actually bedroom 2 is taking a bit of a while to get to where we want it to be, because we've got the high temperature capabilities. There's the ability to achieve where we need it to get.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we say, right, okay, the next logical room that we're going to want to attack is that room.
Interesting.
And then do that. But the flip side to that is we also get customers that come in and go, I mean, they don't necessarily walk in with a blank check, but they walk in and say, my goal is
to have the best.
Yeah, I want this to be the most highly efficient system. I want this to be. I want to use as much of my solar generation. I want to store as much of this heat in thermal storage in the property and everything like that. So, for them, cost is not an implication. But I would imagine, at the moment, logically, that is where those kind of customers, where the majority of heat pumps are going, until maybe Octopus and a few of the others that have come in and started to kind of be changing the profile of it a bit. But I would imagine that's probably the majority of heat pump customers is where that's going.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, one of the energy companies out there that's doing heat pumps, what they're doing with the thermoskirt is, rather than them using it as a full replacement for radiators, they're using it as an add-on. So good. You take the radiator as it is. If it was my house, I'd want to get rid of the radiators, but obviously I am militant thermoskirt man. So that's me. But they leave the existing radiator as it is. So basically, is that radiator bugging you? Yes, I want it gone. Right, we'll swap that out for thermoskirt everywhere. Is that radiator bugging you? No. Okay, well, it's only short by like 300 watts. So we'll just make up that shortfall with thermoskirt. So they leave the rad in, and they basically add the thermoskirt as a second rad. Now, if you said to a customer, leave that rad in, we're going to put another one on that wall, the customer's like, hell no.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go, leave that rad in, we're going to add a bit of skirting heating, the customer's like, oh, right. So it's not that you're trying to fully replace the system, it's that you're just topping it up.
Adding a bit. That's a great idea. I hadn't thought of it like that.
And neither had I.
No.
So I was all like, get the radiators out, put thermostat in. They're ugly and they're horrible and all of that stuff because you live and breathe it. The moment they said, well, we're just going to use thermostat to make up the shortfall, I was like, that's a good idea. Because you got to accept the fact that even people who look at thermostat and go, well, it's less disturbance than putting a massive rad in. Even those people, there's even people who go, I don't even want to have to replace it all with thermostat. We just go, well, we're going to come off the primary flow and returns and we're going to bring it into the inside of the door and we're just going to do 1.5 walls or 2 walls.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, this is a journey, and I can even talk. Talking about those customers that come in on the high temperature route, they're coming in on a journey to low temperature. Yeah. So they're not kind of like, you've done this now and this is how it's going to stay. They're on a journey to low temperature, and they will do stuff like this.
Yeah.
Each room in isolation, seeing how the property performs. I think that's a big thing, is that we don't really know. I mean, there's some great companies out there that are developing these energy monitoring systems to go into homes alongside Hetio. I know Build Test Solutions are doing some fantastic work. Veritherm, again, where we're embedding monitoring systems into homes prior to these installations to really see how rooms are performing and be able to give a kind of data-driven solution around some of this stuff. But if we're working on guesswork and a guy going around with a pen and paper and measuring up, then with the best will in the world, it's only going to be so accurate. But these customers, even though they're going at a high temperature, they are working towards this lower temperature. But with the future home standard, and I appreciate we are a bit tight on time, but the future home standard, this is out for consultation at the moment. This is where we're going with this, isn't it? This is low temperature systems of the future.
Yeah, future home standards, without doubt, in our sector, is the biggest legislative change. The way we heat our homes certainly in my memory, but I'm a millennial, but in most people who are operating in the sector, in their memory as well.
And are we talking about the way the future home standard being the homes, new build homes? Yeah. So this is if a housing developer says they're going to start knocking up 1,000 houses on an estate at some point in the near future, this is the standard that they're going to have to be built or designing these homes.
So we've been engaged with a number of house builders for a number of years on this, kind of in preparation for it. Some house builders have been hedging their bets and doing like a heat pump solution and an all-electric solution and seeing where that's going to go. The latest consultation from Future Home Standards is it's heat pumps, guys. Sorry,
get on with it,
no electric heating, none of that. The COPs aren't high enough. It's heat pumps.
The boiler guys have had a horrible week, haven't they? Because
the boiler guys have had
they've had that, and they've had that. It's basically killed off any dreams they had of introducing hydrogen into the UK.
It's buried hydrogen. It's buried infrared, which when we have an infrared thermostat version as well, so it doesn't matter to me really. But with the heat pump, with the transition to heat pumps, the house builders in particular, we're on trial at the minute. It's no secret. We're on trial with Barrett's at the moment in Energy House 2. And Bellway built one house. It's got underfloor heating and radiators on a Panasonic unit. And Barrett's have got a house that's got thermostat upstairs and downstairs on a Valent unit. And the test data should be out January, February time. We hope. Come on. But basically, what they're doing is they're testing the COP of the heat pump, the stratification of heat, the thermal comfort, the overall, room temperature. So companies like Barrett's, they're not focusing necessarily on what's the minimum standard we can get away with to hit the legislation. These new building regulations are coming in. How do we get to that building regulation as cheaply as possible? It's what's best. How do we actually optimize the performance of the home? And when we're trying to hit this, what's our strategy? What's our overall strategy from a product pitch? So they obviously want to go for heat pumps, and they're testing heat pumps in Energy House 2, and that looks like that's what Future Home Standards is going to be. With the thermostat on test in those houses, what they're trying to do is maximize the usable living space. So house builders have optimized their house sizes, which is a very nice way of saying made them small. Right? So they're smaller than a house was in 1970s. You know, my house is 1973 and it's got a lot of extra space and a playroom at the back and a airing cupboard and a loft and a garage on the side, all of this space. And new builds often, particularly in the affordable sector, don't have that amount of space. So the house builders have like a second challenge, which is, okay, we're going to move to heat pumps, but also how do we heat these houses without compromising space? Is it radiators?
Yeah,
probably
you can't
not.
exactly just start building them bigger to accommodate that.
So
there's a cost reason why they're doing
correct.
this, isn't it?
So some house builders, typically the ones who are doing like modular, won't do underfloor heating because the floor goes in as like a cassette. And then the house builders who are still doing concrete screed, they will do like underfloor heating downstairs, thermoskirt upstairs as like a dual combination. So it's both radiant heat, both save space, both works on heat pumps, and not actually that dissimilar in cost to radiators. So very similar price-wise, maybe marginally more, but for the house builders, they've gone from spending $3,000 on a boiler and 8 rads to spending like 12 on a heat pump, a cylinder, underfloor heating, manifold, controls. Like the HVAC spec for a house builder is just like trebled.
Yeah.
The risk, the capital financial risk is massively increased.
It does. And there's, certainly one of the products that we're working on under the Green Homes Finance Accelerator is it's called Energy as a Service. So the idea is that you can essentially support the house builders to basically say, look, there's no upfront capital cost for you. So we would essentially, as Heatio, we pay for the heat pump, the underfloor heating, these thermoskirts, the battery storage. We pay for that whole system to be installed. And then so that automatically when the new homeowner goes in, they've got a lower energy bill or even potentially zero an energy bill.
Yeah.
So then there's a kind of like a bit like a service charge on an estate. They pay essentially a monthly fee, which covers the service, maintenance and replacements of all that kit in the home.
Of course.
So that starts under a government trial in January, running for I think it'll be 18 months.
Right, cool.
Aiming to do it into 350 homes. But the aim around this is to try and get away from that capital cost for the customer.
And that's for the house builder as well. So, even the house builder hasn't got to front that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's one of the interesting things that the contractors have raised with us. So they've said, for example, you know, a contractor who does the mechanical installation for a house builder, if they're doing 100 houses at $3,000 a pop or $4,000 a pop, you know, they need like 400 grand credit limit with their merchant. Well, now they need £1 million credit limit. Yeah. Because they're delivering that much more cost to each plot. Yeah. And now the merchants are having to take that into consideration. So, you know, let's say they've got a £250,000 credit limit. They might hit that in 6 weeks on an old spec. They might hit that in 3 weeks on a new spec. So now they're having to increase credit limits for large contractors.
Costs and everything else.
Yeah, exactly. So the more you can mitigate upfront cost and roll that into some sort of, you know, monthly model that's stretched out over even 15 or 20 years, because
that's what
a heat pump will last that long.
Yeah, well, as it is, it's a 20-year service agreement essentially. Yeah. But it means that, you know, from the builder's perspective, everything's cool. But it also means the new homeowner coming in, they get access to agile energy tariffs. They get all that equipment coming in. It's not being added to the house price as well, which obviously helps out, because, you know, if the builders are putting these things on, then naturally they're going to want more money for the home. Yeah. So the idea is that it saves builders that upfront cost. We got working with some great financiers that are sitting behind this in the green space to try and to offer that as a kind of 20-year, bit like a power purchase agreement type model. Yeah, yeah. Just requires a lot of capital up front, doesn't it? A huge amount. Patient capital. Yeah, but then there's blended ways in which that can be incentivized with things like grid flexibility that can add into the security around the asset over the 20 years. So there's a lot of things there that we'll certainly learn a lot more over the next 12 or 18 months. But yeah, lots of work to do going into next year for both of us. It's going to be an exciting year, I think, next year. Yeah, I mean, this year's been interesting, but 2024 is already shaping up to be another big pretty wild. I think we're going to get a few more annoyed heating engineers that are going to just see another push away from push towards heat pumps rather than a slow transition. So we've just got to keep beating. It will move that way. We're doing quite a lot of work with colleges at the minute, and what's quite encouraging is how many colleges are just naturally rolling
energy efficiency into the course. So you go and do a plumbing course. It's not like, right, here's how you do a Y plan.
Yeah.
It's here's what a heat pump is. Here's how that integrates with solar. That's how it integrates with batteries. And we're providing a lot of thermoskirt equipment free of charge to colleges. If there's any colleges watching this, then get in touch. Because, it's very important that the people who are coming through, we're talking about between 2023 and 2050. That's a 23-year window. I'll be in my mid-50s by the time we get to there.
The next batch of people that we need, isn't it? These are the fitters of the futures.
Yeah, and there'll be no resistance from them. Because they'll have seen it straight from college.
Yeah,
so that's
what they know.
Yeah, so within 10 or 15 years, that's just going to be organically shifted anyway.
I hope we get there.
Yes, yeah. It's only now we have to turn the thumb screws on everybody and
it does
make
feel
them
like
uncomfortable.
The
yeah.
Ethan, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for coming on the show, really. And look forward to hearing more about Discrete Heat and seeing more of the product going out into the world.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas as well.
Merry Christmas.